Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. 5 most important breakout players for this Nebraska program heading into 2024. And Dill, these are some of my favorite episodes to do. And we've talked extensively about Nebraska heading into 2024, but the primary discussion has been kind of why we believe in this Nebraska team. I think this conversation has a lot more to do with if Nebraska breaks out in the 2024 year, these 5 players probably had tremendous years for Nebraska. Really excited to get into this one, highlight some players that we haven't talked enough about during this offseason. Before we get into it, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and to the Nebraska fans. Y'all know we love talking this program. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, for the Nebraska fans, we left out a lot of players that certainly are important breakout players for this program. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. And Dill, without further ado, let's start with somebody that we just haven't talked much about because he missed spring practice with the injury, and that's Gabe Ervin. And you look at this Nebraska running back room and say it is so much deeper than it was last year. And a guy like Gabe Ervin, why I decided to go with him is that you look at what Matt Rhule wants to do on the offensive side of the football. It's control the line of scrimmage. It's run the football. But I think more importantly, specifically in this 2024 year, it is about keeping this Nebraska offense on schedule. You're going to have a true freshman quarterback starting in Dylan Rhule. One of the best things you can do for a young quarterback is keep some down and distances that are quarterback friendly and give a run game to a young quarterback. And I think Gabe Ervin, coming back from the injury, if he stays healthy, can certainly be that guy for this Nebraska offense.
And also being able to set the tone the way Nebraska's want to set it, especially, both sides of the ball. You hear Matt Rhule talk about, all he talks about is physicality, how physical they practice, how physically they tackle, how physical they're going to be on lines of scrimmage. You need a running back who is going to play. When Gabe Ervin was healthy last year, that was like what they want to do. They'd add in extra linemen. They'd play with like 3 tight ends, and they'd run it the way, like setting the tone to be an ultra physical team. I think you look, Dante Dowdle, you're really excited about what he can do as an all-purpose guy. It runs the ball, should be able to run the ball physically too, bigger back. But Gabe Ervin especially, we've seen it from him in the past. I think almost how the way he's going to run the ball is almost going to try to be the way Nebraska is.
That's kind of why I went with Gabe Ervin. And you could go with Dante Dowdle. And how I like this Nebraska running back room is you just have guys that can do different things. I mean, Gabe Ervin is just an absolute hammer between the tackles. That's kind of how I envision this Nebraska team running the football. But then you have guys like Emmett Johnson or Ramir Johnson coming back from injury too, who can be threats out of the backfield, operate in space a little bit more effectively. You look at Gabe Ervin last year before the injury, he only had 37 carries for 200 yards, had 11 missed tackles forced, averaged 3.86 yards after contact per carry. That is, in my mind, how I envision Nebraska running the football. We haven't talked much about him. If he breaks out and stays healthy, that's a massive storyline for this Nebraska team. Sticking on the offensive side of the football, and let's talk about a guy that we're kind of just been banging the table for a really long time, and that's Thomas Fidone. Now, and I don't know if there's a guy that I'm rooting for more in this 2024 year than Thomas. This was a guy that hadn't played football since the 2020 year, his high school senior year before the 2023 season. You saw him kind of trying to knock some rust off in a very similar conversation we had with Gabe Ervin in terms of what do we need to do around Dylan Rhule to give him the opportunity to be successful. Having a matchup nightmare tight end in Thomas Fidone who can work the middle of the field is going to be a massive storyline for this Nebraska program.
And again, I don't think you can put all his struggles, if you want to call him that last year, lack of production, at least on him. I mean, A, you had quarterback play that was wildly inconsistent, but B, you also didn't have guys on the edge who could make plays. Hence, the middle of the field just felt crowded. Safeties are playing a little closer to the line of scrimmage. I think all that kind of getting fixed a little bit with the addition of some of the transfers, some of the younger guys maybe stepping up on the boundary, along with the quarterback thinking it's going to be far better this year with Dylan Rhule. I think that all kind of sets up for Fidone to have a big year. And I think, again, you see the raw athleticism, the smoothness at that size, the ability to run routes that most tight ends can't run. You saw all that. You just need to see a more consistent game. Probably it just kind of produce as a lack of better
We
word.
know what he can do from an athleticism standpoint. I know the Nebraska fans have seen him dunking the basketball on the hardwood. I mean, this is one of the premier athletes at the tight end position. There was a reason he was a top 50 national prospect. I think another thing that, at least in my mind, is encouraging is we knew Thomas Fidone would take a little bit of time to kind of put on that weight to play tight end for Nebraska. Because again, if you're going to play the tight end position, you got to get it done inline blocking. I think him going into his fourth year with this program, I think he's going to be a little bit more physical. And I think that's massive for Nebraska as well. Dill, you're looking at a tight end that could be one of, if not the best tight end in the Big Ten this year. He's just got to put it together on the football field. I think being healthy, having a full offseason of being healthy, that's going to be a massive storyline. They'll go into our number 3 player, and let's talk about it. This is your guy. So I'm just going to give you the T-box linebacker, Javin Wright, and take us away here.
I mean, I think you kind of saw some maybe growing pains at the linebacker spot a little bit with Tony White and just where he wanted or what he wanted out of his linebackers. I think he wanted more versatility. You saw the guys Nebraska had in the Heinrichs and those type of guys, solid players, but they didn't have the versatility that Javin Wright has. They don't have the ability to blitz, have the ability to play in man coverage as effectively and just do kind of everything in that line, in that box kind of role. I think Javin Wright's a perfect fit. I think when he kind of settled in at that middle linebacker spot by the end of the year, you saw him emerge. I thought he started to be one of the better players on Nebraska's defense. And you kind of look, he is right now the best one they have, I think.
And it's an important position because you do look at Nebraska, and we've kind of said it. There's just not many questions because they return so much production from the 2023 year. One position where they don't return a ton of production is at that linebacker spot. And so I think if you have a guy like Javin Wright who can be that true alpha middle linebacker, that's going to mean the world for this Nebraska defense. And again, you said it best, really good fit in terms of what Tony White wants to do and kind of resembles like how Matt Rhule is going to run this program. You look at Javin Wright coming out in the 2019 class, was a 6'3", 190-pound cornerback. He moved to safety. Now he's moving to the off-ball linebacker spot. This is a guy that, again, we said with Thomas Fidone, Javin Wright has the potential to be one of the better linebackers in the Big Ten. That's a massive storyline for this Nebraska program. Let's go to number 4 and talk about our guy, Princewill U. And I would say we're stretching it here with breakout candidate because he certainly surpassed my expectations for this kid year one. I mean, he was really, really good as an edge rusher, a guy that we kind of expected to need a year. Didn't really need a year, was probably one of the best pure pass rushers on this Nebraska defense going into year 2. This is kind of when we expected Princewill U to emerge. I look at Nebraska's defense last year. They did a very good job affecting quarterbacks, but they kind of had to rely on a lot of blitzing, right? Whether it's blitzing the backers, whether it's blitzing some of those safeties, they didn't really have that alpha edge rusher where you could say, all right, it's 3rd and 7. We need you to pin your ears back and go get after the quarterback. They kind of had to manufacture that with sending some pressure. If Princewill U can emerge as that guy off the edge and kind of allow Tony White to maybe be able to drop some more bodies back in coverage, this is a guy that, one, I think can emerge again as one of the better edge rushers in the Big Ten, but would mean the world for this Nebraska defense for him to emerge in the 2024 year.
You know, especially when you pair them up with the guys they have on the inside who we know are dominant players, are going to be dominant players. You want to see one guy who, again, should be able to get his work, should be able to avoid some of those doubles, having teams have to essentially scheme to him because you got to deal with the guys on the inside too. I think it's a very conducive role for a really good edge rusher to put big numbers up. And edge rushers who put big numbers up, that's how you have a really good defense. Because when you can get like 10-plus sack kind of numbers from an edge rusher, I mean, that changes how everything operates.
And I want to just throw out Cam Lenhardt's name too. I would, if you would have asked me 12 months ago and said, all right, what freshman has a bigger impact as a true freshman, I probably would have pointed to Cam Lenhardt because he was a guy that was a little bit more physically developed. Now, I think Princewill probably has the entire upside in terms of what he's going to be 3 to 4 years down the road. Cam Lenhardt's a guy that can emerge as well. And if you get the best, if you get breakout years out of Princewill U, Cam Lenhardt, that's a massive step for this Nebraska defense that, again, was already really good in 2023. Last name I want to talk about, and again, one of our guys, wide receiver Jaylen Lloyd. And I think there's a couple of reasons why I decided to go with Jaylen Lloyd. One, you could go with Malachi Coleman. I certainly wouldn't push back on a guy like Malachi Coleman breaking out either. You look at what Dylan Rhule, probably his best asset that he's bringing to this Nebraska passing attack is what he can do throwing the deep football. I mean, this is a guy that you go back to the high school film. There's not many quarterbacks that were coming out of high school or quite frankly in the country that can attack the deeper third like Dylan Rhule can. This was a massive problem for Nebraska last year, manufacturing explosive plays. I look at Jaylen Lloyd and say, this kid runs what, 10-4 coming out of high school in the 100-meter dash. He averaged 39.5 yards per catch. He was number 4 receiver for Nebraska, only catching 6 balls last year. You look at Nebraska manufacturing some of those game-changing plays on the offensive side of the football. I look at Jaylen Lloyd and say, he can be that guy for Nebraska.
And you're right. You kind of saw the emergence of his ability to just make plays down the field, especially he's such a good tracker of the football, it felt like, but also can really burn it. So again,
he can roll.
You have those kind of that combo because again, a lot of guys can run, not a lot of guys can track the ball and do both at a really high level. I think he can do it. And you're right. At the end of the day, they just need to be able to open this offense up a little bit. They need to be able to play with a little bit more space in the box for some of their other guys to eat, like Fidone in their running game. So again, I think someone's got to do it. Jaylen Lloyd. Malachi Coleman obviously has the physical traits to do it. We haven't quite seen as much from him, I suppose. So I kind of do agree with the Jaylen Lloyd. But again, he could obviously fight it because Malachi Coleman's just got a different tool set, if you will, than almost anyone in the country. But Jaylen Lloyd, I do think you've seen the green shoots, if you will, of a guy who can be a really, really good deep ball receiver.
And I love what this Nebraska wide receiver room is. If you ask me, okay, one reason is obviously the quarterback play taking a step in the right direction. But if you ask me another reason why I'm believing in this Nebraska program, it's what they've done from a pass catcher standpoint. It was a serious problem for Nebraska in 2023. You bring in Jamal Banks from Wake Forest, a guy that is going to thrive in those short intermediate concepts, a chain mover from Wake Forest. You look at Isaiah Nayor, certainly another guy that can work vertically down the field. Jaylen Lloyd, Malachi Coleman. Ja'Cory Barney is a true freshman. Sounds like he's going to be a guy too for Nebraska. So you look at this pass catcher and say, Dylan Rhule has got a lot of different tools to kind of get to work with in this 2024 season. I went with Jaylen Lloyd. You could certainly go with a guy like Malachi Coleman as well. Probably left out some players that we could have talked about specifically on the offensive line. Would love to hear from you guys. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.